Welcome to the Illuminations Media Network.
So what these things absolutely don't want you to know is that they do exist and that they are predatory parasites feeding off you. So as I was learning that, and I was being warned by my patients, what you're doing is dangerous. This was after the guy said the voices want to speak to you, and they warned me, you have no right to do this.
Yeah, no right to, what was that?
These are their exact words, and his voice tone changed just minimally. And these words poured out of his mouth. They said, "You have no right to interfere with our way of life." And I was like staring at him like, boom. It's like my head was like, okay, because up to that point, I didn't want to believe they were evil spirits. I was thinking it was some deranged part of their subconscious.
Right.
But my denial system was already in shambles because as the information was mounting, I just kept denying it because I didn't want to, I didn't want to think that I'm dealing with evil spirits and I'm surrounded with evil spirits. And now they're warning me to stop doing what I'm doing to try to help these guys, and it was getting strangely personal. So I ran into, I think it was Miguel Ruiz was speaking about them being predatory parasites. Carlos Castaneda does the same thing.
Yes.
So I brought one of those books in, and I brought that patient who told me that into the office. And I said, I'm going to read you a passage from this book as to what this shaman thinks these things are. And I'd like you to tell me what your voices do in reaction. So what I did is that, and this could only be done in a prison, is when you do something that they don't like and they get all hyped up, you keep giving them more of the same. You couldn't do that in a hospital.
Don't back down. No.
Yeah, well, you had to in the hospital because these guys got upset. And then when psychiatry found out you're upsetting them because you're trying to find out what's going on, then they jump down your throat and order you to stop. But in the prison, it was like, okay, all right, they don't like this, give them more of the same. Just keep doing that, So,
Jerry, that seems like an important tip for us to understand.
Yeah, and that it is not your intention. So what the shaman was saying, that these are predatory parasites, and I read that to him, and in the middle of reading it, soon as that came up, soon as that concept came up, I looked up at him to see what he was thinking, and he was like frozen, like an icicle, just staring at me, with this glazed look on his eyes, and I'm like, uh-oh, I'm in big trouble, and he said nothing. And I'm looking at him, and it was really odd. And then all of a sudden, from behind my head was this loud electrical crackling, just like an arc welder. It was like crack, 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 crack. And it went from behind me up my office wall to the right at a 45-degree angle. Crack, 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 all loud. And it just kept progressing up that wall till it got to the ceiling. And I'm like, this guy's going to attack me. So I pushed the chair back against the wall and was waiting for him to come. And of course, they always sign a female officer to the medical unit who would have been worthless. I mean, it would have been determined one way or another by the time she got there. So I pushed against the wall, waiting to kick him if he came at me. And I didn't want to take my eyes off him, but what the hell was going on with this crackling? So I'm like glancing between him and this crackling,
right?
Watching him to see if he's going to get up and get me, and then trying to figure out what's causing this crackling. And I could see nothing, I could smell nothing. It was just this loud crackling, and it just went all the way up the wall, and then it started across the back wall, and he was sitting against that wall, so it was easy to watch him and watch the crackling at the same time. So I asked him, I said, do you hear that? And he just kept staring at me with this zombie-like look. He didn't respond. He's just staring at me with this glazed over look. I'm like, what is going on? And that thing kept that went on for like 30 or 45 seconds. I mean, it wasn't just a little, and then it comes down the left wall and it's moving toward me. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And I'm watching him, and then it jumps into this Rubbermaid trash can right at my feet. And I looked down in there, and it had been cleaned by the inmate porter the night before. There wasn't nothing in there. And I'm looking, and it's crackling in there right next to my feet. And then, I look at him, look at that, and then all of a sudden it stops. And he slowly gets up very rigidly, like a robot or a zombie or something. And he goes, I gotta leave. And I'm like, hey, go,
Yeah.
go.
Whoa.
So he kind of shuffles down the hall. It wasn't his normal gait. And I'm like, thank God he's gone. And I'm sitting there absolutely stunned. I'm like, what the devil just happened?
Mm-hmm.
And, I look around the walls. I get up and I'm inspecting the walls to see if they're burnt, if there's any kind of electrical
Right.
thing. Nothing. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't smell anything. There was nothing there. So I ran out in the hall and I checked all the other doors, and none of the other medical staff were in. There was no doctors in. There were no nurses in yet. I was the first one. All those doors were locked. There was nothing that could account for that. So I went back in my office and I closed the door, canceled all my appointments for that day, and just sat there stunned. Like, what am I getting into? Because I had no map. There was no cognitive map.
Of course.
And there was nobody I could talk to.
Right. You'd
The only
better
people
talk about it.
Yeah, there was nobody I could talk to. And I was thinking, hey man, am I losing it? Am I going insane?
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't talk to anybody. I didn't know anybody who I could talk to who would understand this. I called him back. I was so frightened that I did not talk to that guy for 3 months. And then one day my curiosity got the best of me, and I had security bring him down to my office again. And we started with some small talk. And I asked him, I said, hey, last time you were here, did you hear that crackling on the walls? And he said, yeah, but I'm surprised you did. I mean, me.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, has that ever happened with you and anybody else? He goes, yeah, it happens with my friends sometime. They hear that crackling. I said, well, what do you do? He said, well, I just ignore it and they find their own explanation for it. I couldn't find any explanation for it because it went on for so long. So I asked him, I said, what was that? And he said, that was the voices. I didn't know they could do that, So what they were doing, they were operating outside of his head. And for the first time, it dawned on me that they could come out and they could affect physical reality, which scared me. I mean, that scared the pants off me, because if they could do that, what else could they do? So then I asked him, I said, well, what were they telling you as you left the office? And I'm thinking, oh, well, he wasn't going to hurt me because I've been working with him for 6 months and he's getting better. And I was surprised he looked better than I thought he would, and he was doing some of the exercises that I told him to do. And he was in much better shape when he came back that 3 months later than I'd ever expected him to. And I asked him, what were they telling you when you left the office? And he said, they told me to go get a shank and stick it in your belly, which is a prison knife, homemade prison knife. And I said, well, why didn't you do it? And he said, I couldn't find one.
Because he couldn't find one.
And I went, oh. So I knew I was entering territory that I had no map for. Yeah. There wasn't any place I could go to go, okay, where are you going now? What's coming next? It was just kind of like, stumbling around, and getting burned here and there, getting yelled at by psychiatry here and there, eventually being threatened by the chief psychologist when these guys started recovering. You think they'd be happy about that? They weren't.
Well, then what were they going to do if they didn't have any patients to work with?
They'd always have plenty, because the prisons are now the state hospitals.
Oh, Lord. Mm-hmm.
So
to look at all of this and to look at how we can protect ourselves, the recognition that if you've dealt with trauma at some point, that you may be more suggestible.
Yes. Yeah. You already have that lattice laid. It's already there. It's already generating negative emotional energy. It's already your subconscious is already triggering when something happens that's similar, even if it's remotely similar, it triggers that negative crap to come up. And then these things jump in and just pour gasoline on the fire.
Right.
So
Similar ways to how hypnotherapy works.
Yeah.
There's a level of suggestibility that is created.
And that's exactly what these things are doing. They're constantly suggesting, and there's hundreds of negative. We printed them on Sherry's Keyhole Journey website, a whole list of, probably 100 of the negative things that these things tell people, and they'll tell you anything that they think you will buy into.
Right.
Right. So,
and if it works, then they keep going.
If it works, they keep going, and they keep feeding it and feeding it and feeding it. And they'll put a different interpretation on stuff that happened. Well, this guy doesn't like me because this happened. So any thought they can inject into your mind that will generate negative emotional energy, they will do it.
So the important thing, as we said in the very beginning, is to recognize that if there are negative ideas that are coming into your mind about you, tearing you down, they are not yours. That's
for sure. That one's dead on. And I took that in, and I tested that with a number of psychotic inmates, and that checked out solid. And it verified some of the other stuff that I was doing that, Sherry put it in a much more concise form that's much easier to remember. And she calls it, That's a Lie program. So she has that on her Keyhole website, Keyhole Journey website also, where you can actually read about the entire program. She wrote it up. So everybody should be using that because they hit everybody. They don't just hit, it's the clearest with schizophrenics. You see it the clearest there, but they're hitting everybody.
Yes.
All the time with whatever they can get away with.
Are more open to it, whether it is with, like we said, the trauma, but also the drug use, mentioned alcohol, the cocaine, the meth, that people are trying to feel better, right? Maybe block these things out, but it's actually making it worse, creating a wider opening.
That's right. And there was one guy, this guy was an Apache. They brought him down from the Apache reservation in northern Arizona. He was so violent that the Apache police couldn't even control him. So he was heading for our unit, and I was watching him on the computer. I was told he was coming, and he was kind of like he was a drunk, but he was kind of like a evil Indian skinwalker or something like that. He was like a evil sorcerer or something to that effect. And I watched him crash through the system. He didn't even stop in classification. He just boom, 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 boom. Next thing you know, he's right here, which was absolutely, that just didn't happen. So I went, well, I got to meet this guy because I'm never going to meet anybody like this again. So I pulled him in my office when he got in, and he hated white guys with a passion. It must have gone all the way back to the Apache Indian Wars, man. But he made it real clear, that the look in his eye was like, I'd rather slit you open and spill your guts all over this room than say another word to you. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be your psych. I'll be pulling you in once a month to check on you, see how you're doing, see how your medications are working, adios, I'll see you next month. So I went to the head of the Indian gang on the yard. They had a little Indian gang, and he was a Navajo, real peaceful guy. I said, what's going on with this guy? And he said, you be real careful with him. And I went, okay. So, as it probably took months, before I could speak to him for 20 minutes in a normal fashion. And he was telling me some of the stuff he could do. He was fighting with spirits. He said that he watched these, first I asked him, about these things and the things he would do. And he would constantly be fighting with spirits, so he could see them where I couldn't. And then I finally got the nerve to ask him after a few months, like, okay, if you can do all these things and you can see these things, why can't you stay sober? And I was kind of bracing myself, going, okay, I don't know what he's going to do with that. And he looked me in the eye and he said, because of the spirits of dead alcoholics. And I said, well,
Huh?
tell me more about that.
Yeah.
And he said, they can't get drunk in spiritual form unless they enter somebody who's drinking, you know. And he said he watched his girlfriend, who was also alcoholic, he watched these spirits walk her into traffic in Phoenix, and she was hit and killed by a truck. He said there was one bar in Phoenix where these things were piled so high over that bar. He said they disappeared into the sky. He said every time he went by there, that these things would attack him and try to get in and get him to drink more. You know, he said that's why alcoholics can't stop drinking, because they're not the only one drinking. You know,
They're being used.
they're being used to
These
drink
beings that
also.
no longer have a body.
Yep. And
have
can't
the
get
experience of drinking.
Yep. And they can't get drunk unless they enter somebody into somebody else's body. And who said that? The guy who wrote The Road, psychiatrist, I mean, one of the most sane ones, wrote The Road Less Traveled. He said he witnessed that happen one time, and where he actually saw a spirit entering a drunk guy. So this guy said that's what's happening is once they realize that they're not the only one drinking, you know, that changes things.
It does.
You know, so it's just like with the psychotics. It's like it's not their thoughts, you know. So something else is driving that drinking. And of course, psychiatry thinks they know what it is. They always think they know what it is, but you know, they don't have a single friggin' test of any kind, not lab work, not urinalysis, no MRIs, nothing to substantiate any of the hundreds of diagnoses they have in their DSM. Nothing. It's based on nothing. You have this group of psychiatrists who meet and they dream up these friggin' disorders. And some of them were totally ridiculous. They had Southern Bell syndrome in there for years before they took it out. I think one of them got slapped around by his wife, and that one got removed. And then they had, what was it? It was homosexuality they had in there as a mental illness, a mental disorder. You know, so, you know, 25% of the college students in the U.S. at this point have been diagnosed with some kind of mental illness and are on some kind of psychiatric drug. That's outrageous. It's outrageous.
That's money.
You know, that's money, you know, and 1 in 5 adults, or about 43.8 million adults in the U.S. have been given some kind of psychiatric diagnosis and are on psychiatric drugs. You know, so that reflects the relentless effort that psychiatry and the pharmaceutical industries are putting on society, you know, to expand their diagnosis of disorders so they can, you know, so the psychiatrists come up with all this crap that they can't prove at all, that has no measurement, there is no valid test, there is nothing. It's kind of like a doctor who sees you once and says, by the way you walk and the way you talk and the way you look, you got cancer. You know? Well, how do you know that? Well, that's just because of the way you walk and talk. I mean, that's basically what they're doing.
And then again, there's the suggestibility and the nocebo effect.
Well, yep. And then you look on TV and it's like, oh, do you have this mental illness? Do you have this illness? I mean, they're advertising illness. They're suggesting over the TV that these guys get sick and that they go to ask their doctor for these medications that are toxic. I mean, the antipsychotic drugs are devastating. I mean, they're devastating. They kill brain cells. There's more and more research coming out. They kill brain cells. They destroy your peripheral nervous system. You know, they cause all kinds of damage.
And they're diagnosing and prescribing Ritalin to 3-year-olds.
Yes.
This is, I understand. A 3-year-old is a child who is supposed to move around. He's not a miniature adult.
It's insanity. It's you know, over the years that number of diagnoses that they've come up with has expanded from like 75 to, I think it's almost at 300 right now. And they make more up every freaking year. So, it's a committee of psychiatrists that get together and go, oh, well, yeah, we got a new syndrome here. I mean, it's characterized by this. It's insane what they're doing. Then they publish that in the DSM, and then the institutions that, like, when I was in the doctoral program, you had to virtually memorize that crap as reality, and there's nothing to support it except, so millions of Americans have been programmed by psych and the drug companies that the only treatment for anything is chemical drugs. The naturopaths, the hypnotists, the chiropractors, the guys who do the acupuncture, all those guys are given a label of shysters.
Quackery, yeah.
Quackery. I mean, the AMA and psychiatry and the medical, they're knocking everybody else out and saying that there is no spiritual anything. You're a body, and the only way to treat that body is with these toxic chemicals, and they're all toxic.
Well, Jerry, that what you're saying takes me back to the history of psychiatry before there were the chemical. You mentioned earlier about the electric shock treatment.
Oh, I saw one, man. I almost fainted. It was horrific. I mean, I can tell you the story, but I've never fainted about anything. I mean, no matter in my entire life, I mean, I've pretty much got through, but boy, after watching that, I started getting woozy, and I was about to go down, and I had to hang on to one of the pillars at the state hospital after that. I mean, I can tell you that story. It's not a very pretty one.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm sure in order to get the context of what you're sharing, you would want to share that story so we can get it.
Well, let's go back a little further than that. Back 100 years ago, the only way that they could control these guys was with chains. So in the Powell building where I worked, those chains were still rusting and hanging on the wall.
Oh, they were still there. Wow.
They were still there. So they would drag these people in from that were totally uncontrollable. And the first director there, Powell, he did not want to chain these guys if he could help it. But there was one guy. Now, this was a very interesting story. I got it from the first clinical psychologist who worked there. He wrote a book called something like, what was it called? Something with the word grace in it or something. But it was his experience of working there in the 50s, which was 50, 67, 20 years before I got there. So back in the old days, they would chain him to the wall. And there was this one guy that they had chained to a wagon, and it took a whole army of them to get him to the basement. And they chained him to the wall in the basement. And all night he raved, and he pulled out these blocks that were supporting the foundation. And they said that had he continued doing that, the foundation would have collapsed. And then they came down one day, and he was all calm. And he said, I'm okay. He said, he said something like, I found the Bible, or I found religion, or something like that. And the voices had disappeared. And they let him out, and he behaved normally. And he escaped and went back to his community. And when they followed up on him, he had a normal life. So that was the first time there was some kind of divine intervention on the institutional level. But what they did to treat these guys is they gave them freezing cold water. They did something what they called is puking. So they would give them this something that they had to drink that they made them sick, and they would have to throw it up. So they'd repeat that. You know how you feel after you throw up? You're weak and you feel awful. So what they were doing was trying to find some way to bubble these guys down, so they wouldn't be violent before they had drugs. So they came up with straitjackets. And I talked to some of the attendants who were working there back in the days before I got there, and there were some horrendous battles that went on with the patients and the attendant staff, and both sides suffered damage.
I'm sure.
So they would wrap them up in these big straitjackets and leave them there until they were exhausted. Then the shock treatments came. They were doing, I think it was either $3,000 a month or $3,000 a year. And what they do is they run electricity through their veins, and they would actually stun them, and that killed brain cells. I mean, even back in the 20s, they knew it killed brain cells. But it would stun this guy for a good period of time. The voices would disappear for a brief period of time. So that matched what's his name was saying, the dentist.
Right. Right.
So I found that interesting. They would eventually come back, but after a shock like that, they disappeared for a while. Then they would return. And let me see, the one I watched, I got called. It was this is burned into my mind. I was standing there, and there was my friend from the other unit called me over, said, "Hey, Dr. Joe is doing a shock treatment here at such and such time. You want to see it?" And I'd never seen one before. So I said, yeah, I want to see it. So I ran over there, and there was a bunch of students surrounding this guy, and he was like a prima donna. He was one of their psychiatrists. And he was talking to the students and telling them, that these big electrodes like this big, they strap them on each side of the person's head, and they put gel on them so the electricity would not burn their skin. Otherwise it would burn them. And so it was a box that was sitting on the table with all these knobs and dials and stuff on it. And then he called for the patient, and these two nurses brought in this little frail lady. I mean, she was just like skin and bones, very extremely depressed. And she seemed to know the drill. So she kind of got up on this gurney that everybody had surrounded with him with that shock box on the head of it. And she kind of helped them get her up there. And then they strapped her down with these arms and legs so she couldn't move at all. And I'm like, what's going on here? And then he pulls out this giant needle. I mean, the thing must have been that big around and that long. And he filled it with this milky fluid. And I said, well, what's that horse needle for? And he said, it's muscle relaxer. That if we didn't give them this muscle relaxer, when we gave them the shock, they would snap their bones. They break their bones in their arms and legs. And I'm like, a treatment that breaks arms and legs? I mean, what are these guys doing? So here's this poor little lady, she's kind of looking like, she's looking up like, oh my God, it's coming again. I know what's coming, and she's not saying anything. She's kind of out of it. And he puts the electrodes on there, fastens them on, and then he starts up this machine, and he goes, okay, everybody get back. And then he pushes the button, and she just started convulsing. Like, I mean, I was like, whoa, and she's just bucking against those straps and writhing, and she wet her pants and spitting and foaming. And I'm like, whoa, it's like, whoa, I couldn't friggin' believe what I was seeing. And then he shuts it off, and I'm staring at her. And then he's prattling on, like he was prima donna with all these students, talking to the students, and I'm staring at her, and she's turning cyanotic. She's blue. And I scream at him. I said, she's dying. She's cyanotic, And he, after an afterthought, he looks at her and he goes, oh, okay. And he gets these paddles and he puts them on her and he shocks her again and starts her heart, and she's just gone, So after that, I kind of turned to go out, and I almost fainted. I almost fainted. I hit that pillar, and I was grabbed onto that pillar, and I was just holding onto that pillar because I was about to collapse. It was like 3,000 of those they were doing. Like a machine. They said it was like a factory. They would just run them through one after the other, after the other, after the other. Now the shock machines don't, they're not that violent, but they still kill brain cells, So, and the other thing they did is they gave them insulin shock. So they filled them full of insulin, to shock them. And apparently that would stop the voices and for some while. I mean, the stuff they did was just, the treatments were almost worse than what they were dealing with, but they didn't know what else to do. They didn't believe in voices. They've been hypnotized to think that these were hallucinations. They didn't know what else to do besides give them these, that kind of treatment. Then when the meds came on, oh man, they just drugged the entire population. They brought in antipsychotic drugs by the dump truck full.
Hmm.
And the friggin' pharmaceutical salesmen were always coming and going and making a fortune. That stuff cost a fortune, and it cures nothing. It cures absolutely nothing. All it does is suppresses the symptoms temporarily.
Okay.
And I think right now Risperdal is something like $380 a month to stay sane. So they're making a killing on it, and that's driving the healthcare costs up for everybody, because it's
Right.
not these patients who pay for that. It's their insurance or the government, and the government gets its money from us. I mean, it's insane what they're doing.
But Jerry, do you think they have their place in combination with cognitive therapy?
Yes, they definitely have their place, because there's a number of patients that I would not have been able to reach if they weren't calmed down enough to where I could reach them.
Right.
Because they do suppress the voices. So once those voices, if you don't suppress those voices and you're working with a raw patient who's just coming off the street, you either have to know how to get rid of them yourself, which I did, but it was only temporary.
Right.
Or they have to be on medications that weaken those voices and suppress them. In a lot of cases, it doesn't stop them. They're still hearing it, but they're weak. And in some cases, they're totally gone temporarily. The patient, that's where the use of the drugs really comes in. So I don't see the drugs going away, but with long-term use, the damage they cause is incredible. They kill your brain. They rot out your peripheral nervous system. They dry your mouth, blurred vision, dizziness, agitation, weight gain, tardive dyskinesia, involuntary movements of the mouth and the face and the upper body, and Parkinsonianism, tremors, rigidity, unsteadiness. And then what they do to mask those symptoms, or at least they did at the state hospital, was like, okay, well, we still need to keep giving this guy these toxic drugs, but we're going to come up with something that masks those negative symptoms that those drugs are causing in the first place. So they fill them with cogentin. So that masks those tremors and that kind of stuff, while the antipsychotic continues to eat out their peripheral nervous system and kill their brain.
Well, Jerry, I think that's why my grandfather, certainly he was not, he was not an intellectual, but he would say that's why they call it practicing medicine, because they're just practicing.
They're practicing. Yeah, and they're doing a lot of damage in the meantime.
Wow.
So yeah, the medications have their place, but with long-term use, I mean, they're going to turn you into something we saw at the state hospital called the Thorazine shuffle, which is, these guys are like robots and just shuffling around because their nervous system is so destroyed. And, with short-term use, the nervous system will recover, but with long-term use, it's permanent damage. It doesn't go away.
Yeah.
I mean,
so the goal is to get off of them.
The goal is to get off of them, and that's not what the drug companies want.
Wow.
This is a perfect drug for them. It cures nothing, but it suppresses the symptoms, and it costs a fortune. They are making billions of dollars every year selling these toxic drugs, with the misconception that the voices are hallucinations, that this is a permanent biological imbalance, which they have absolutely no proof for. None. Zero. The best they have is a correlation, and that's far from proof. They have no proof. They have no tests. And that's one of the things I first noticed when they started telling me, well, this is a chemical brain imbalance. I said, well, okay, what's out of balance, and what tests are you giving these patients to see what's out of balance, to see if you can fix it?
Yeah.
They didn't have any tests. They didn't even know what was out of balance. They had no idea. They were just mimicking what they were told in medical school and what the pharmaceutical industry was telling them.
Yeah.
So you have a bunch of zombie psychiatrists running around that won't question authority and just believe everything they're told. And they're as big a zombie as the patient is.
Right. And what that does is that it disempowers the public.
It disempowers and victimizes them, both.
If I'm thinking that I have a chemical imbalance, and so there's nothing that I can do about it.
Hopeless
depression. To go for the okie doke.
Yeah.
But if I'm empowered with knowing that, hey, those voices are not me, that's outside of me, and I can do something about it.
Yeah, and
That's where I wanna go.
even if it's as little as repeating the 23rd Psalm and watching them howl when you do that, you
Mhm.
know, for somebody who thinks that their condition is totally hopeless and they can't do anything about it because that's what psychiatry told them other than take those toxic drugs.
Mhm.
If they repeat the 23rd Psalm and they hear these things howl because they don't like it, that's
There's an
just
indicator.
something that they can do
Yes.
to strike back. So
Yes.
there's a whole big number of tools that you can give these people to hit these things back with,
Mhm.
and that empowers them to start taking charge, of their lives. And
Yes.
they need the support of a cognitive therapist or somebody who knows what they are so they can be kept on that track. And if they don't keep moving along a positive spiritual track, it's like tuning a radio. You don't want to be on that negative frequency. You don't want to be tuned to that. You want to change it to a more positive high frequency.
That's right.
And
Because, as you mentioned earlier, guess who's hanging out on that frequency?
yep,
You
yep.
don't want to be there.
And
Yeah.
and those entities don't want you touching that dial.
No, they don't.
They don't want you touching that dial. But
Mhm.
what listeners have to understand is that where you give your attention is where you're giving your energy.
That's right.
So what you would pay attention to is where your energy is going.
That's
So when
right.
these things fill your head with all kinds of negative thoughts about yourself, you're giving them your energy.
Mhm.
You can choose what you want to think.
You have dominion.
Yep.
And that's what the scriptures were talking
Yep.
about. You were
Yep.
given dominion over that garden, and
Yep.
that garden is your mind.
That's right. And these things are polluting it,
Yeah.
and they're hitting everybody. It's not just psychotics.
Yeah.
They
Now,
hit
Joe, you
everybody.
mentioned that everybody is affected. And
Yep.
so, there's some of us who are not as suggestible as others, as we mentioned
Right.
before, those with, drugs and those who have experienced trauma, who have larger openings, if you will. But you personally have experienced them, you know. How
Yeah,
did you
they
go
don't like
through
they.
those processes? I
Oh,
mean,
they.
when in the green room we talked about, there was the scuba diving um, instance, there was the plane instance.
Oh,
How
yeah.
did you handle that? Because if you hadn't, you wouldn't have been here to speak about it.
Well, I think, had I mean, I was raised to question authority. I mean, I didn't question authority. I always questioned authority. I mean, from the way I was raised, I didn't trust authority. Had I trusted authority, I wouldn't be talking to you here right now. I'd be saying, oh yeah, it's a chemical imbalance and these things are hallucinations. So that's what set me on course. And then when I found out that in the doctoral program, those people didn't like to be questioned. It's like,
No,
you,
they
you
don't.
you do what we say, you believe what we say, and don't question us. And I'm like, wait a minute, So you want me to tell the story, the scuba diving story? Is that
Please, that
okay?
story it's frightening, but it is inspiring. It lets you know that it is possible to take charge.
Well, at,
Mhm.
at that point, I still wasn't clear what was going on. Now, if I were to tell this story to a psychiatrist, my diagnosis would be schizoaffective.
Ooh.
I'm telling you, that's what this story, that's what they would diagnose me on this one. So, it was like, I don't know, it was after several years of being at the state hospital, I moved off the grounds into a little cabin on the lake. And at night I'd go swimming at night because the water would calm down. There wouldn't be as many motorboats out on the lake. And I was a strong swimmer. So days before that, I prayed, I said, Lord, what are these things? Show me what they are. I mean, I'm not sure. They're not good, whatever they are. I'm not sure what they are. Show me what they are. And nothing happened for a couple of weeks, maybe. So one day I'm heading out to swim in the lake, and I was a strong swimmer. So I got into it was dark. It was probably 9:30 or so. Water was bath warm. The surface was like glass, and I'm just cutting through it. I hit my stride, adjusted it to where my intake of air was equal to what I was burning, and I was moving through the water pretty quick. And then I got into like a hypnotic stride. I mean, it was just, stroking. And then it was like I started feeling tired and I'd lost track of time. And I looked up, stopped and looked up, and I was far from shore. I was way far from shore. And, I knew I couldn't make it back to shore. I was too tired. But, I was by then I was a certified scuba diver with, lots of dives. And it didn't worry me at all. You just go into that survival float, and you could do that all day, especially in bass water. So I wasn't worried about it in the least. And then all of a sudden, here comes this yes set. I mean, it's what salesmen use. You like this thing, you need this thing, your wife is going to like this thing. All these are yeses, and you want to buy it. They want you to do yes, I want to buy it. So they call it a yes set. So here comes this thing rolling off, like you're too far to make it back. You're too tired. Yeah, that was true. It's getting dark and you won't be able to see the shore. Well, that might be true. What else did it say? There were 2 or 3 things. It's like, you're too weak or something like, that kind of stuff. And none of that was a factor to me. So I went, well, what I got to do is go back into that survival float. So you put your hands behind your back and you're kind of like a dead man floating in the water. You're not using any energy. Your face is in the water. Your hands are behind your back. And when you need air, you whip your head up, blow the air out that you have, and then suck in another full breath. So you actually sink for 2 or 3 feet before you bob back up. And then you go back into like you're floating with your face under the water. And then when you need air again, you just whip your head up real quick, blow it out, you start sinking right away, and then you suck in another big lungful as you're going under, and then you drop out. So you're just bobbing like a cork back and forth, but you're not using any energy. So, or very little. So while I'm doing that and I'm sinking, here comes this thought again, running, well, you're too far from shore, it's getting late at night, you can't see the shore, and you're sinking toward the bottom, you're going to drown. I'm like, I'm going to what? And I wasn't worried about it at all. I'm going, what? What the hell is this? I knew it wasn't me because I wasn't worried about it. They were picking on the worst possible person they could find to try to get them to panic to drown, basically, especially with all the experience I've had diving. So I'm like, what the hell is this? So what I did is on the next breath, instead of just bobbing up to the surface, it told me I was sinking, I was going to drown. So I did the same thing I did at the hospital. I started blowing out air, and then I started sinking quicker. Now, keep in mind, there's no sight, there's no sound, it's pitch black, and I'm sinking into the middle of this lake, and I had no idea how deep it was, but I was defying whatever the hell this thing was. And then you hit what's called a crush depth. So my lungs collapsed because of the pressure of the water. And I started sinking at a much quicker rate. And I was so freaked out that I knew, seconds after I started for the surface, I knew what it was. It's the crush depth where your lungs get, the water pressure crushes your lungs and you're no longer buoyant, you're sinking. So even on the way to the surface, I knew what it was. So as I hit the surface, I took in a new breath of air, and here comes this thing again. Oh, look, you're far from the shore. You're too tired to make it to the shore. It's getting late. You can't, you're too weak to make it. And you're panicking. And I'm like, I'm not panicking. I might have been a little uncomfortable based on what was happening, but I was far from panicking. So I go down again. So this time I let the air out. I hit the crush depth. I start sinking real fast. And then all of a sudden I feel this freezing cold moving up my legs, and just like, I'm like, whoa. And again, shot for the surface. And even before I got there, I knew it was the thermocline. I mean, I passed through millions of them.
Okay.
And I said, okay, I know what that is. I get to the surface and it starts it again. You're too far from shore, you're weak, you can't make it back, you're panicking, and it was like, what the hell is this thing? So down I go again. This time I went through the thermocline. Now before that happened, I came to the surface and it said there's a motorboat coming and it can't see you and it's going to grind you to pieces. Now, underwater, you can hear sound coming from a long direction, a long way, and I didn't hear that. So I look around, and sure enough, in the distance is a motorboat with the navigation light moving right toward me. So I'm watching it, and I'm like, okay, if I need to dive, I'll go down under it. I've had to do that a number of times and hug the bottom. I could have got down far enough for it to pass over. I wasn't worried about it. If I had to go down, I could do that, and I knew what to do. I wouldn't like it, but I could do it. So I'm watching this thing come on, and as it's coming, this voice is telling me, and what surprised me is it sounded just like my own thoughts.
Wow.
It sounded just like the thoughts that go through my head. Now, this shocked me. I thought it would sound different. It sounded just like any one of the millions of thoughts that go through my head on any one day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there was no change in tone or timbre or loudness or anything. It sounded just like one of my own thoughts. So I'm watching this motorboat, and the thing keeps saying, well, if they can't see you, you're going to get ground to pieces. And I'm kind of thinking, no, I'm not. But I'm watching it, and it passes by like maybe 15, 20 yards away. They don't see me, and I'm watching it disappear in the distance, and I'm not paying attention to the wake. So I'm watching the boat, and the wake comes and washes over me just as I'm taking a breath in, and I get a lung full of water, and I start coughing. And this thing jumps in there. You're panicking. You're drowning. You can't make it. Look at you. It's throwing everything at me, and I'm going, what the hell is this thing? And I cleared my lungs, and then I went, okay. And I headed for the bottom again, went all the way down, stuck in the mud. And let me see, I don't know if I shot to the surface after I hit the mud because I didn't know what it was. I thought it was rock bottom because it was rock bottom near the shore where I swam. I hit the mud and I felt it crawling up my legs, and I shot for the surface again. And here it comes again. You're panicking. You're not going to make it back. You're going to drown. Look at you. So I went back down again, and my feet stuck in the mud. I went through the thermocline. I knew what the mud was, and I'm just hanging above the bottom like a dead man. And I was kind of scared. So when I went under, I wasn't thinking anything because I was afraid. And I was listening for something to grab me. It was like, is something going to come out of the dark and grab me? And I didn't know how deep the water was, so I just kept clearing my nose and clearing my ears as I dropped down until finally hit the mud bottom. And I was just floating there above the bottom like a dead man. I wasn't moving. I wasn't thinking. And it was just a peak experience. It was, all my senses were shut off. I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't hear anything. I wasn't thinking anything. There was no taste. There was no sound. All there was that I was aware that I was aware.
Okay.
And that's all. That's what's there. But beyond all the feeling and the hearing and the sound and all the distractions, and it's what's there is a pure awareness that you're aware that you're aware. And
awareness of being.
Yep. You're just being. You're just being, and that lasted for maybe 20 seconds, which was all I could hold my breath. But I've never forgot it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what's there. Past all this other crap that we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
That voice never came back again. Once I got to the surface, it was gone. It was kind of like, I defied every step that it tried to convince me. And that's kind of the process you use with schizophrenics too. They have to defy everything these things are telling them. And they have to realize first that it's not them talking to them. It's something with an independent intent and motivation. And that motivation is to destroy them. And what I don't understand, I think I told you, what's curious is their suicide rate is at the bottom end 5 times that of the normal population.
Yeah.
But the suicide rate of psychiatrists is also the same. It's 5 times higher than the normal population, which is interesting. It's very interesting.
It seems, here's just a theory on that. that the psychiatrists go in so deep with these people that they're on that frequency.
No, well, what most of them I've dealt with, they're pill pushers. They don't talk to these people at all. They just kind of, oh, you got that? Here, take this pill. They don't go in deep at all. They don't go anywhere near as deep as you do with your clients at all. They're pill pushers. It's very superficial. Don't challenge them. Take these medicines, and that's it. That's it. I'm not saying all of them.
Mm-hmm.
There are some good ones out there, but most of the ones I worked with are high-paid pill pushers that you don't challenge because they've managed to get the power to run the mental health system. And they're in league with the drug companies.
Right.
So there is no treatment as far as they're concerned other than dishing pills out.
Right. So why do you think their suicide rate is so high?
What I think is that the voices are going after them too,
Mm-hmm.
because, you look at all the other staff and they weren't going after them. They weren't going after psych nurses. They weren't going after me until later. They weren't going after attendants. They weren't going after medical doctors. It was the psychiatrists that were being assaulted. And I think I have some statistics on that somewhere.
I wonder why they would target them, especially if they're not, going in deep. And
Well, think about it. What did their meds do? What do the meds that they're dishing out to these psychotic patients do? What effect does that have?
They temporarily suppress.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they temporarily suppress as long as they're being given. So they're interfering with the food source.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the assault rate for psychiatrists is 69.2 per 1,000 patients. Now, custodial staff and psychiatrists at the state hospital and even the hospitals that I was working at later, their assault rate is 69.2 per 1,000. The assault rate of custodial staff is 68 per 1,000. So these are custodial staff around 24 hours a day.
Right.
So why are psychiatrists being assaulted at a higher rate than the people who are there with them 24 hours a day?
I think you've put it together. Yeah, that has to be it.
Yeah. I have some information on their assault rate here, but it's much higher than any of the other staff. And they were being pounded, and even in the private hospitals, there were one or two of them would get pounded. Some of the more lippy ones, the more arrogant ones.
This is fascinating. Well, you and Sherry have some great information on your websites. I would love for you to share how our listeners and our viewers can get a hold of some of that helpful information. Since we're all being attacked, we're all being seen as a food source, if you will. We need to protect ourselves.
Yeah. No, I sent you a email with some of that stuff on there.
Okay.
But
well, I'll make sure that I do post it in the description box.
Okay. And then Sherry's site is called keyholejourney.com.
Mm-hmm.
And they would have to go to the paranormal section. And then there's two sections there with letters that people have written me and videotapes that of other interviews. But we've just sent a book to a publisher, matter of fact, yesterday, and we're hoping to hear something. So we may have a book that kind of summarizes all this shortly.
Wonderful. That's some important work there.
Yeah, there is a cure for schizophrenia. It's one of the top 10 health problems in the world, but they're not going to find it in a biological answer because it's not. Once the voices are gone, all the symptoms of schizophrenia, or at least paranoid schizophrenia, disappear with them. They're gone. Now the other types, hebephrenia and disorganized schizophrenia and delusional disorders, that's a whole different ballpark. But we do have a cure for paranoid schizophrenia, and that's one of the biggest classifications. They're the guys who take the guns and the voices are telling them to shoot a bunch of kids in school. They're the ones who shoot up movie theaters, with the voices they're telling them to. And the mental
Just
health system.
imagine the feast, you know,
Oh yeah.
of a huge event like that, the feast of negative
Of-
emotions,
Yep.
just
Yep.
pouring
Fear.
out.
Fear. You look at the TV. Look at what they're broadcasting over the TV. It's all fear. You're going to get killed. You're going to get bombed by North Korea. These people are doing this. Terrorists. It's not any good news. It's all negative news. So
True.
that's what these things feed off of. And then you go all the way up to the cabal who are flooding Europe with all these people that don't fit in, and there's clashes, and they want people separated. They want the fighting that goes on. They want a war, because
Yeah.
that's what feed these things. And the people at the top who are doing this stuff are infested with these beings.
Yes. And one of the therapeutic processes I focus on with my clients, if they are in situations where they're frightened, they're anxious, they're tense all the time, pay attention to what you are taking in as far as entertainment.
Yes.
Are you a junkie for what is this reality TV where people are fighting one another all the time?
Oh yeah. Not only that, look at what they're broadcasting over TV. It's
Constant.
by the time somebody gets to be a teenager, they've watched 5,000 murders on TV.
Become
It's normal. They've
desensitized.
normalized it. This is what you do when you get pissed off. You get a gun and you shoot somebody. And so here's all the guys going, "Oh, get rid of the guns, yeah, man." So England got rid of the guns, and now they got knives. So
Right.
everybody's being stabbed in England with knives. So now they've come up with just recently, well, we need to file down the sharp point on knives so nobody has a sharp point anymore. I mean, it's insanity. It's not the guns who are shooting people. It's people who are shooting people. The gun is an inanimate hunk of metal.
Right.
It's whatever's telling these people to do that is shooting people. But of course, a lot of them say, well, the voices told me to do it, so they lock them and their voices up. And then after they're done their sentence, so you get all these psychotics locked up in prison, because the prisons are now the state hospitals, and they're flooded with psychotics who can't make it. And then they do their time, and they give them 2 weeks worth of antipsychotic medications after being brutalized and hardened in prisons
prison
for years, so they can do the most horrendous things, and they're hardened to them. And then they release them on society with 2 weeks worth of meds and say, if you run out, go to the nearest ER. So the ERs were flooded. When I was working the ER, they're flooded with these people. That the mental health system in the U.S. is garbage.
Yeah.
It's absolute garbage.
And then the people who do not get their meds, who just go off of them.
Yeah, they go off them because the voices don't want them taking those meds. And I had patients tell me the voices told me not to take those because I was being poisoned. And I've heard that a million times from patients saying the psychiatrist is poisoning me. So even though they might not come out and say that, they get the patient to focus on the negative side effects of those medications, and that's what they're focused on. Now, if you take those side effects, which aren't good, you already read them to you, and then you compare that to a list of the symptoms of psychosis, 3 pages of these horrible, horrible, horrible symptoms, and you ask them to choose which is worst, well, they'll say, well, the psychotic symptoms are worst. And then you say, well, why do you keep going off your meds? And they'll say, I don't know. That went on for years before one of them finally said, the voices told me not to take the medications, because it doesn't, the comparison is like you give them a choice. Okay, do you want the flu or do you want the bubonic plague? And they were consistently choosing the plague. Why would anybody in their right mind, which they weren't, do that over and over again? So they think punishment has some kind of effect on these people. No way. There's nobody that punishes them worse than they punish themselves. You just can't do it. And punishing them just infuriates them. It just makes them worse. So then they're released on society. And I mean, they used them for torpedoes. Some of the gangs would get a paranoid schizophrenic guy and say, hey, you see that guy over there? He's he's going to kill you. You better get him first. He's one of the rivals. So they whip this guy up, and he runs over there and stabs a guy, but he's psychotic. So they just send him off to a higher custody unit. I mean, and they become, I've seen them become supernaturally strong when they're infuriated. And there was one case of You know, in the prison, the guards are usually these macho guys. You know, they like to control, they like to boss prisoners around. There was in one, now I didn't see this myself, but I talked to two people who I trust who did. And this happened in one of the one of the major units up in Florence prison, where they were trying to get a big psychotic guy to move from one cell to another for some reason. And he didn't want to move. You know, so they told him, well, instead of turning off the water and not feeding him for a while until he decides he's going to move, they go, well, you're challenging us. And it's on this big cell block where all these prisoners, hundreds of prisoners, are watching what's happening. It's like the show. So he refuses to come out, and it's got everybody's attention. What are they going to do now? So they said, well, you come out or we're going to go get the pepper spray. And they have these canisters of pepper spray that look like they're about quart size. So they went and they got two of those things. And they said, come out or we're going to spray you. And this guy goes, well, you know, you little sissy pansy butts, you know, come and get me. So they start spraying him. He throws a towel over his face and he sits down on his bed, and they just drench the whole room with that stuff. I mean, it's awful stuff. I mean, it would be enough to get any normal prisoner crying to get out of there. Mm-hmm. He took that towel off and he went, you know, cussed them out, you know, lowly pieces of crap. I mean, everything, call them everything under the sun. And they said, okay, you know, come out or we're going to go get the stun guns. He goes, come in and get me, you bunch of sissy wussies, you know, calling them everything you can imagine, just insulting them in the worst way you can insult a guard. And none of them were about to go in there after that. So they got these two 50,000 volt stun guns that shot these little things that stuck in them, and the wire would come out of the stun gun and it would bury in the inmate. So they shot two of them in him. And as one was discharging, the other one was charging. They did that 13 times, 50,000 volts of electricity. And this guy just stood there shuddering. He didn't drop. Even one shot from one of those things would bring down the biggest inmate, and he'd be out of it on his knees. I mean, he'd be done 13 times. And the warden said, stop, because I'm going to be accused of cruel and unusual punishment. So after 13 of those 50,000 volt shocks, and the guy just standing there quivering, but not coming out, you know, they finally stopped that. So they said, now come out of there, buddy. We're going to go get the dog. So here they're moving up the progression of, and the inmates were terrified of the dog because these are trained attack dogs and they just rip you to pieces. So they bring the dog in. They tell him, come out or we're going to sick the dog on you. The guy sits down on his bed and he goes, come in and get me, you bunch of panty-whiz. You know, he's cussing at him. So they open the cell. The dog runs in, charges at the guy. He throws his hand up in front of his face, and the dog clamps onto his wrist all the way down to the bone. You know, so he pulls the dog with his arm right in front of his eye. Well, this thing is all the way down to the bone, dripping blood all over the place. He looks the dog in the eye and he says, sit. And the dog sits, but it doesn't let go of his arm. It just sits. And then he starts petting the dog, going, nice doggy, nice doggy. As this thing is clamped onto his wrist. I mean, it must have been incredibly painful. And he's bleeding all over the place. And he, nice puppy, nice puppy. And all these guards are outside the thing going, what the hell is going on in there? And the dog handler's like, she's shocked. You know. So they grabbed the line that was on the dog, and they pulled the dog out, and the dog's got him by the arm, and they the dog pulls him out with him, you know. So wow. They pull him out and they beat the crap out of him, got him to move. But yeah, they're supernaturally strong. I mean, they get energy from some source. It's got to be the dark side. I mean, no normal human being could tolerate that. You know, that's the worst I've ever seen it. But I've seen a lot of cases where, you know, 110-pound inmates bouncing 3 guards around the inside of a cell like popcorn until they tire him out. You know, they become supernaturally strong. Yeah.
Yeah, that is definitely proof that there's something else going on.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Well, our guest, Jerry Marzinsky, I thank you so much for joining us here on the Illuminations Media Network and enlightening us about these things that we just don't understand.
Well, for the therapists out there, you know, don't listen to me. look for yourself. Look for that energy drain. It's there. Look for the voices being consistently negative and that not matching up with there being hallucinations. I mean, it's staring you right in the face. All you got to do is see it. Look for it. You'll see it.
Wow. Well, Jerry, we're going to have you back on because I know that there's much more. We've only touched the surface here.
That's true.
Yeah. And there's so much more that we need to know so that we can empower ourselves.
Exactly.
And we can move through this.
Yes.
But yeah, last thoughts. One last thing that people can definitely use in a moment's notice when they notice.
Well, not all your thoughts are your own. That's the big one.
That's it.
And every negative thought about yourself does not come from you. And you do not have to accept every thought that comes into your mind. So as you learn to heal yourself, everybody else will be healed along with you. But the healing has to come from you. Nobody can do it for you.
Yes, it has to begin with you. Well, listeners and viewers, I thank you so much for joining us here on the Illuminations Media Network. Until next time, peace and blessings.
Thanks for having me.
Aww.